The retirement home activities. Director's investigation. Full script. 12 minutes, 5 scenes. Hook. 0000030. Margaret smiled warmly as she set up bingo cards for the afternoon activities at Sunset Manor retirement home. To the residents, she was just their beloved activities director who made their days brighter with games and crafts. But Margaret's gentle demeanor concealed 30 years as a CIA operative who specialized in tracking international fraud networks. And when a sophisticated scam began targeting her elderly residents, those investigative skills would expose a criminal operation worth millions. Welcome to Hidden Warriors. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if stories like this prove heroes protect more than just activities, hit that subscribe button. Sunset Manor Retirement. Home buzzed with daily activities as Margaret Chen organized art classes, bingo games, and social events that kept 120 residents engaged and happy. For 8 years, she had been the heart of the community, known for her patience, creativity, and genuine care for elderly residents who often had few visitors. Margaret's reputation was built on her ability to connect with residents from all backgrounds, remember their personal stories, and create activities that brought joy to people dealing with health challenges and loneliness. The staff respected her organizational skills and the way she could calm agitated residents during difficult moments. Her background showed former social worker who had specialized in elderly care before transitioning to retirement home activities coordination. Clean record, excellent references, and the kind of compassionate professionalism that made families feel confident about their loved ones' care. But Margaret's real identity was Agent Margaret Chen, former CIA operative who had spent 30 years conducting undercover investigations of international financial crime networks. Her specialty was deep cover operations, where she assumed civilian identities to track criminal organizations that targeted vulnerable populations. Her retirement home position wasn't career change, it was strategic assignment. Intelligence agencies had identified that elderly Americans were becoming primary targets for sophisticated fraud schemes operated by international criminal networks, and traditional law enforcement lacked the resources to investigate these complex operations effectively. For 8 years, Margaret had used her activities director cover to monitor and investigate financial crimes targeting elderly victims while providing legitimate care and entertainment for residents who genuinely benefited from her professional background in understanding human psychology and building trust. Agent Margaret Chen had joined the CIA in 1975 during expansion of financial crime investigation capabilities following several major international incidents. Her training combined advanced undercover techniques with sophisticated understanding of financial systems, allowing her to infiltrate criminal organizations that operated across multiple countries. During her CIA career, Margaret had conducted deep cover operations throughout Asia, Europe, and South America, assuming civilian identities for months or years while tracking criminal networks that specialized in fraud, money laundering, and financial exploitation of vulnerable populations. Margaret's expertise was recognizing patterns in financial crimes that appeared random but actually indicated organized criminal activity. Her investigations had exposed networks that stole billions from victims worldwide, often targeting elderly individuals who had accumulated savings but lacked technological sophistication to recognize sophisticated scams. After CIA service, Margaret had worked with federal task forces that investigated financial crimes, specifically targeting American seniors. These cases revealed that organized criminal groups were systematically exploiting elderly victims through increasingly sophisticated schemes that combined psychological manipulation with advanced technology. Her retirement home assignment provided perfect positioning for investigating these crimes from the victim's perspective, understanding how criminals identified and approached elderly targets, and developing countermeasures that could protect vulnerable populations while building cases against criminal organizations. During routine activities coordination, Margaret noticed unusual patterns in residents' behavior and financial discussions. Several residents mentioned receiving phone calls about investment opportunities and government benefits that required immediate financial responses to avoid losing money or facing legal problems. Margaret's CIA training recognized these contacts as indicators of organized fraud operations rather than random scam attempts. The coordination between different approaches, the sophisticated psychological techniques being used, and the specific targeting of residents with particular financial profiles indicated professional criminal organization. Using investigative techniques developed during her CIA career, Margaret began discreet monitoring of the fraud network's activities. She documented phone calls, tracked financial requests, and analyzed the psychological manipulation techniques being used to identify the scope and organization of the criminal operation. Her investigation revealed that the fraud network had identified Sunset Manor as a high-value target containing residents with substantial savings, limited technological knowledge, and social isolation that made them vulnerable to manipulation. The criminals were using multiple approaches simultaneously: fake government agencies, phony investment opportunities, and manufactured family emergencies. Most concerning was the sophistication of the operation. The criminals had detailed information about residents' financial situations, family relationships, and personal histories that could only have been obtained through extensive intelligence gathering or inside information from someone with access to residents' personal files. Margaret realized she was investigating an international criminal network that was systematically exploiting elderly Americans using intelligence-gathering techniques and psychological manipulation methods that rivaled those used by foreign intelligence services against national security targets. Margaret's response drew on 30 years of CIA experience conducting complex undercover operations against sophisticated criminal organizations. Her advantage was complete trust from residents and staff, allowing her to gather intelligence while maintaining her cover as a caring activities director. Her first priority was protecting residents who were already being targeted by implementing discrete security measures disguised as normal activities programming. She organized financial safety workshops that taught residents to recognize scam techniques while secretly documenting the specific approaches being used against them. Margaret used her activities programming to create opportunities for residents to discuss their recent communications, allowing her to identify which residents were being targeted and gather intelligence about the criminals' methods and organization structure. Most importantly, Margaret began her own undercover infiltration of the criminal network by posing as a vulnerable elderly victim herself. Using techniques developed during CIA service, she created a false identity and made contact with the criminals to gather evidence about their operations. Her investigation revealed that the fraud network was international in scope, with call centers operating from multiple countries and money laundering operations that moved stolen funds through complex financial systems designed to avoid law enforcement detection. Margaret documented evidence that the criminals had stolen over $2 million from elderly victims across multiple states, with Sunset Manor residents being targeted for an additional $500,000 in planned fraudulent schemes that would have devastated their life savings and financial security. After gathering sufficient evidence, Margaret coordinated with federal law enforcement to conduct simultaneous raids on the criminal network's operations while ensuring that targeted residents were protected and their financial assets secured. The investigation culminated in coordinated arrests across 3 countries, with FBI raids on domestic operations and international law enforcement targeting overseas components of the fraud network. Margaret's evidence led to prosecution of 23 individuals and recovery of over $1.8 million in stolen funds. Official reports credited excellent cooperation between federal agencies and financial institutions in investigating elder fraud schemes. Margaret's role remained classified, her activities director cover maintained, with residents believing their beloved activities. Coordinator had simply helped coordinate with authorities during an investigation. Margaret continued her work at Sunset Manor, but with enhanced mission parameters and expanded protective capabilities. Her success had demonstrated the value of positioning experienced intelligence personnel in locations where vulnerable populations could be protected through professional expertise rather than traditional law enforcement approaches. 3 months after the investigation, Margaret received discreet commendation from federal agencies responsible for elder fraud prevention. Her work had become a model for protecting elderly Americans from increasingly sophisticated criminal operations that traditional law enforcement struggled to identify and investigate. Margaret's activities programming expanded to include more comprehensive financial safety education, and she began coordinating with other retirement facilities to share protective techniques and identify emerging fraud patterns before they could victimize additional elderly Americans. 6 months later, Margaret was approached by a network of former intelligence operatives who had been recruited for similar protective roles in retirement communities nationwide. Her investigation had proven that elderly Americans needed specialized protection from criminal organizations that used intelligence gathering and psychological manipulation techniques beyond the scope of traditional policing. Have you ever wondered about the people who dedicate their lives to caring for our elderly family members? The professionals whose protective instincts extend far beyond their official responsibilities? Share your thoughts about elder care in the comments. Subscribe to Hidden Warriors for more stories of ordinary caregivers whose extraordinary backgrounds continue protecting our most vulnerable citizens. Some guardians organize bingo games and craft activities while secretly organizing something much more important. Next time you visit elderly family members in care facilities, remember that the staff who brighten their days might also be protecting them from threats they'll never know existed.